Hey, everybody. My guest today is Dr. Joanna Harper, and we're going to talk about the Olympic boxing controversy. So let's start off by you giving us just a background of this event.
So, first of all, it has to be understood that there are some people who aren't born 100% male or 100% female. And terms such as intersex, variations of sex characteristics, or differences of sexual development have all been used to describe these people. These conditions are nothing new. The ancient Greeks knew about it. There was a Greek myth of Hermaphroditus that talks about this. So people somewhere between male and female have existed since humans have walked the earth. It has become a focus of sports lately. In 2009, Caster Semenya, a South African middle distance runner, won the world championship, and she undoubtedly, she does have a difference of sexual development. And what happened with her sort of kicked off the modern era of what should be done or could be done with people with differences of sexual development, or DSDs, as I'll say. And there are many different conditions that fall under these categories, but there's a subcategory of DSDs called XY DSDs that are of particular interest for sports. And those are conditions in which human beings are born with an XY chromosome and with testes, but with female typical genitalia. And so they are identified at birth as female, but even within XY DSDs, there are a number of different types. One XY DSD, the most common XY DSD, is called androgen insensitivity syndrome, where despite having XY chromosomes and testes and high levels of testosterone, these people develop as typical females because their androgen receptors don't work the way the rest of us do. And so while they have high levels of testosterone in the blood, the testosterone doesn't reach the muscles, and so they develop just like any other women. On the other end of the spectrum of XY DSDs is a condition called 5-alpha reductase deficiency, where there's an enzyme deficiency that prevents testosterone from being converted to another androgen called dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. And DHT is responsible for male pattern baldness, but it's also responsible for the male genitalia. So again, people with 5ARD, as it's called, are born with female genitalia and are identified at birth as female. But with 5ARD, these people go through a masculinizing puberty, and they gain the sorts of advantages that men gain when going through puberty over women. And so that's sort of the background in terms of what is known about DSDs. And how they relate to sport. Now, the two boxers, the Algerian boxer and the Taiwanese boxer, both were identified as female at birth. They both were raised as female. They're both legally female in their country. There is a good chance that they have an XY DSD. We don't know this for certain, but it's a good chance. Both of these boxers competed in the 2020 Olympics, which were held in 2021 in Tokyo, Japan. Neither of them earned a medal there, but both of them have been successful since then. The Taiwanese boxer won a world championship in 2022. They were both within earning medals in the 2023 World Championships when they were prevented from going any further by the International Boxing Association, which claimed that they had, quote unquote, failed a gender test. The specifics of the gender test that the IBA undertook aren't known. And beyond that, the IBA is generally a disreputable organization. And the IOC, or International Olympic Committee, has not allowed the IBA to run Olympic boxing in the last two Olympic Games. They have set up a special organization just to run Olympic boxing. And that's of note because in 2021, the IOC specifically said that they were going to leave gender categorization up to the individual sporting bodies. And so each sporting body then has, since 2021, has come up with their own gender specifications. And the IBA was no exception to this. I don't think they did a very good job, but we may never know that. But the IOC is not willing to take the results of the IBA tests because they have decided that they are a disreputable organization. And so last year, the IBA disqualified these two boxers. But the organization, which is essentially a branch of the IOC, this year said that in terms of boxing for the 2024 Olympics, anyone who held a passport from their country saying that they were female could compete in the female division. The IOC did this knowing that the IBA had disqualified these two boxers before, and surely they would have understood that this was likely to cause controversy. And sure enough, once these two boxers started winning matches, then the whole world started to learn about these two boxers, and some very unfortunate things happened. They got called men. They were labeled as transgender, and a number of horrible things have been said about these boxers. They will both be fighting in the semifinal round. I think it's later today, and we will see how things go. How's that for an overview?
No, that was good. So I have more specific questions. So regarding the DSDs, the differences in sexual development, so that seems to be the case that it is true, right? Like they are not trans, they have some sort of DSD. Is that correct?
Well, I don't have their medical records.
Yeah, nobody has that, right? So we're just guessing.
Somebody has their medical records, but certainly the Algerian and Taiwanese federations have their medical records. But they're not saying. And the IBA, whatever gender tests they conducted last year, if you look in their minutes, they're not specific. It just says that there were standard gender tests taken. And who knows what that means. But in all probability, they have DSDs. But no one who knows this is saying, and the rest of the world, we don't know for sure, but it is a high probability that they have a DSD.
Yeah. Well, what I meant, nobody has, I mean, like, we don't know for sure.
No.
I
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know either. We're just like guessing. Okay, so in regards to athletes with DSDs, what do you think is fair?
Let me preface what I'm going to say, that it's such a difficult thing that I would say, regardless of what I think is fair, this is so difficult, so controversial that nobody can make a perfect decision on this. But let me highlight two sports federations that have made very different decisions on DSD athletes, and yet both of these decisions, I think, have worked out reasonably well. The first of those is World Athletics, and there's no sporting federation that has more experience with athletes with DSDs than World Athletics. This goes all the way back to the 1930s. And there were a number of the world's best female athletes in the 1930s almost undoubtedly had DSD. The only one we know for sure is Stella Walsh, who was a Polish-born athlete living in the United States, and she was killed in a robbery in the 60s, and they did an autopsy on her, and they found out that 30 years after she'd competed in the Olympics that she had a DSD. But there were probably a number of others in the 1930s, and so world athletics has years and years of experience and years and years of getting it wrong until they have worked out something which I think is, while not perfect, is not unreasonable. In 2011, World Athletics first implemented testosterone-based regulations for DSD athletes. And they said that in order to compete in the women's category, DSD athletes had to lower their testosterone below a specific amount. And the amount was 10 nanomoles per liter. The current regulations for World Athletics require DSD athletes to maintain testosterone below 2.5 nanomoles per liter, which is at the upper range of typical female values, for 2 years prior to starting competition and then thereafter. I think in terms of allowing athletes to compete and maintaining fair conditions, or what I prefer to say, meaningful competition for all women, I think that the World Athletics regulations meet both of those requirements that I would have for saying a good policy. However, the weakness is that they mandate the DSD athletes to take testosterone suppressing medication. While I think that's a very reasonable thing to do for transgender athletes, because most trans women suppress testosterone anyway because we're happier, healthier, and less suicidal that way, many DSD athletes are perfectly happy with their bodies and don't want to change it. And so requiring them to lower their testosterone may make them less happy, less healthy, and more suicidal. So that is the weakness of the World Athletics policy, and it has been challenged 3 times in court since 2015, and by court I mean the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The World Athletics has won the last 2 of those challenges, and it looks like this rule is here to stay. And as I say, I think that it does a good job of providing meaningful competition for all women. It allows a path for DSD athletes to come in and compete, but it may trample their human rights somewhat by requiring them to lower testosterone. On the other hand, FIFA, the governing body for what the rest of the world calls football, North America we call soccer, has taken a very different approach. They have said that they will make rules on DSD athletes on a case-by-case basis, but they have not disqualified any DSD athletes anywhere in the world. They've allowed them to compete. And we saw this year in the Olympics. The Zambian football or soccer, women's soccer team had 3 or 4 probable DSD athletes on their team. And they didn't win any matches in Paris. At the Olympics, they tried to have a broad geographical representation, not necessarily the best countries in the world. And so there were 2 teams from Africa, neither of which won a match or made it through to the quarterfinals. But the Zambian team, while they're one of the best football teams in Africa, I think they're ranked like 60th in the world. So despite having the DSD athletes, which could be considered a quote-unquote unfair advantage, they are also disadvantaged by the coaching facilities support funding, etc., which compared to European nations is certainly second rate. So FIFA has allowed unlimited inclusion for DSD athletes, and there's still meaningful competition in the sport of football for all women because the DSD athletes, while a couple of them are truly exceptional players, their teams don't do that well, and there is still a balance of competition. So both of these federations have put in policies, very different policies, that I think are reasonably successful.
Okay, so one of them has some sort of testosterone limitation, right? And the other one doesn't have any limitation. They just allow everyone to compete. Okay, but
Well, technically, they say case by case, but they have allowed everyone to compete. They do reserve a potential to possibly restrict somebody, but they haven't.
okay, so a fundamental question that I have is, do athletes with the DSDs have an advantage because of their DSD?
Depends on the DSD.
Okay, so for the boxers, do they have an advantage because of their DSD?
I don't know what their DSD is.
Oh, so again, right? So then people from the outside, without having this information, we're just all guessing.
Right. If they have 5-alpha reductase deficiency, which I think is a reasonable possibility, then they are almost undoubtedly stronger than their opponents. And that is a noticeable advantage. But we don't know that for sure. And so do they have an advantage? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay. And in terms of which approach that you prefer, or is it one or the other? Like the testosterone limiting one or the just open one?
Well, again, as I say, I think one has worked reasonably well for athletics. One has worked reasonably well for football. If we're talking about boxing, and we are, of course, then if I were in charge of world boxing, I think that first of all, I would want to determine which DSDs these boxers have, and I doubt very much that the IBA did that last year, and the IOC certainly hasn't done that. The national federations of Algeria and Taiwan may have, maybe not, I don't know. But it's pretty sophisticated testing, but it can be done, and that's the first thing I would do. And if they have a DSD similar to 5-alpha reductase or similar to that, where the athletes have gone through a masculinizing puberty and gained those advantages, then I would require them to reduce testosterone to typical female values before stepping in the ring. While athletics, as I say, has a 90-year history of dealing with this, and boxing doesn't, I think there's an extra duty of care here because of the potential safety issue. And so if I were in charge, that's what I would do. But that wouldn't make me very popular with many people. But anything you would do in this case, wouldn't make you very popular with a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. It's a very controversial issue. Yeah, I do think it's true. And I think a lot of people recognize that there is a safety factor involved, right? If we're talking about athletics, which is track and field, right? That's what that is.
Yes. Yeah, there are the world calls it athletics.
Yeah. So track and field, you're not beating each other up, right? Soccer, you're not beating each other up. Boxing, that is literally what it is, right? You're punching each other in the face, right? And you would think that if there is some advantage that is significant enough that would endanger one of the fighters, like there should be extra caution involved. I think a lot of people can see how boxing would be different than something like soccer. The other question that I had is just in regards to what exactly we're trying to equalize here, right? So if what we care about is what advantages and disadvantages that two fighters have, and we're trying to equalize this fight to make it fair, then do we even necessarily want it to be based on sex or gender? Like, can't we just figure out other dimensions that to equalize to make the fight more fair? So yeah, in general, men are bigger, but there are smaller men out there too, right? So like, and maybe you can have men with like lower testosterone levels and stuff like that. So why not have a boxing or other sports be designed such that those dimensions that are directly relevant be equalized?
You can do that at lower levels of sport, but at higher levels of sport, you simply can't do that. The advantages of going through a testosterone-fueled masculinizing puberty are so great that at high levels of sport, in most sports, like maybe not archery, for instance, or shooting or ski jumping, equestrian, where the horse is the real athlete. But in most sports, the advantages of going through a testosterone-fueled puberty are so large that women just wouldn't be successful. And so even if you have weight categories, which of course they do in boxing anyway, women wouldn't win anything. I'm most familiar with the statistics in track and field, but for example, the greatest single athletic feat that I have ever witnessed in person was at the 2022 World Track Championships, where Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone won the hurdles in 50.69 seconds, I believe. She blew away her best rival by over a second. It was an absolutely incredible thing. But that year, more than 200 men ran faster over the 400 hurdles, and they had to go over higher barriers to do it. And so even the most incredible performance I've ever seen wouldn't make the top 200 times in that event that year. It's that biased when you talk about athletic performance in most events. So if you divided things up any other way than by male and female, then you don't see women winning Olympic medals. You don't see women winning professional contracts. Caitlin Clark doesn't get to dazzle us. All of those things, all of the amazing female athletes that we have enjoyed the performances of over the years and who have done great things, don't get to do that unless there's a female division.
So I kind of want to go back to the boxing example. So is there a situation where you have somebody with the DSD, like it would be more fair for the person with the DSD to box men?
You could make that argument if the boxer had a DSD, such as 5-alpha reductase deficiency, that it would be fair, quote unquote, fairer to make them box men. But anyone who identifies as a woman doesn't want to box men. And so there are sports that have done this with transgender athletes, for instance, where they've created a women's category and an open category, or a women's and a men's and a third category. And, transgender DSD athletes don't come out in that case. So they just don't participate in the sport, and because their gender identities are not being respected. And so, these two boxers would probably give up the sport before they would fight men.
Interesting. Okay. What do you think people should know about this issue moving forward? Like, what's one thing that you wish people would understand?
First of all, that there's a lot of diversity in the world. The idea that everyone is a man or a woman, simply isn't true. And so we should be respectful of this. And if someone is born with characteristics that make them somewhere between male and female, we should respect what they say about themselves. If they identify as male, they're male. If they identify as female, they're female. However, when it comes to sport, especially elite sport, then we have to look at the biological characteristics that matter for those sports and try to make some sort of eligibility decisions on people. And, that's going to cause hard feelings no matter how these decisions are made. And I think that we have to respect, in general, sporting organizations. The sporting organizations that I have worked with on DSD and transgender athletes are trying to do the best they can. I would say the IBA is not one of those organizations that we can respect, but the vast majority of international sports federations are trying to do the very best that they can on this difficult issue. So try to have respect for the individuals. Don't be calling people names. Don't Hate should have no place in this. It's an enormously difficult decision. The IOC has made their decision in this case in one way. I may not have made the same decision if I were in charge, but I think we have to respect what the IOC has done, and let's see how it plays out. And let's not be hating on any of these boxers, especially the Algerian and the Taiwanese boxer. Cannot help the way they were born. They can't help the rules that they are competing under. They are just doing what they can under these rules.
I really am disheartened by all the hate that I've been exposed to on social media, and I can only imagine what the athletes are going through. And I just feel really bad for them.
Yes, so do I.
Well, I really appreciate your insights and your expertise on this issue. I think it's a good place to wrap things up.
Okay. All right.